Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Now, this is the second part of our discussion regarding the chronic obstructive pulmonary disease that we discussed, mainly the bronchial asthma. And the hallmark of bronchial asthma, increased airway responsiveness to a variety of stimuli. We have seen that results in three things: episodic bronchoconstriction, inflammation of the bronchial wall, and increased mucosecretion from the bronchial glands. And we have seen that the groups used to manage these effects are bronchodilators, anti-inflammatory agents, and nicotine antagonists. So, up till now, we have discussed the first bronchial dilator part, and now we are going to discuss the next two parts: anti-inflammatory agents and the nicotine antagonist. Now, out of anti-inflammatory, obviously the most important one group is the corticosteroid. The mechanism of action of these corticosteroids, we have seen that they have been used to treat asthma by their broad anti-inflammatory efficacy, which is partly mediated by the inhibition of production of inflammatory cytokines. Remember, they are not bronchodilators, they don't relax the airway smooth muscles, but they reduce the bronchial reactivity and reduce the frequency of asthma exacerbation when taken regularly. As far as the clinical uses are concerned, corticosteroids are effective in improving all the indices of asthma control, like severity of symptoms, test of air caliber, bronchial reactivity, frequency of exacerbations, and quality of life. All these indices of asthma, they are very much improved with the chronic use of corticosteroids. Usually, therapy is continued for at least 10 to 12 weeks, and then gradually it is withdrawn to determine whether the problem of asthma or COPD is controlled or not. If not, obviously more prolonged therapy will be needed. Usually we use inhaled corticosteroids, but inhaled corticosteroids are not curative. Effective, they are only as long as they are taken. So, usually inhaled corticosteroids are labeled as controllers of the disease, controllers of the problem. Here is asthma or COPD, so controller of the asthma. This regular controller therapy with the inhaled corticosteroids, usually this is given to the patients who have not shown any improvement with the bronchodilators we have discussed, beta 2 agonists, anticholinergics, or xanthine derivatives, aminophylline, theophylline, etc. Or to those patients who experience worsening of symptoms despite the maintenance therapy with the bronchodilators. So, in such patients, we start these controller corticosteroids, that is through inhalation. Aerosol treatment is the most effective way to avoid their systemic adverse effects. Otherwise, if you will use oral or parenteral route, so obviously we have to face variety of systemic side effects of corticosteroids. So, to avoid that, that is why we have selected the aerosol route, in which the concentration is obviously required is much lower than the parenteral or the oral route. But due to this, we are avoiding the possible systemic side effects, which usually seen with the oral or the parenteral route of administration. The common salts which are given through inhalation may be beclomethasone, budesonide, cyclosanide, flunisolide, and fluticasone or mometasone and triamcinolone. So, they are all given through inhalation with minimal systemic absorption and minimal systemic side effects. Usually a daily dose of these are 4 puffs twice a day. For example, the beclomethasone, which becomes about 400 microgram per day, because one puff emitting 100 microgram. These 4 puffs are equivalent to about 10 to 15 milligram per day of oral prednisone, that is delta Cortal, for the control of asthma. But with prednisolone we have to face severe side effects, systemic side effect, but with the aerosol route of beclomethasone we will see very few systemic side effects. Another important thing is, one of the cautions is switching patient from oral to inhaled corticosteroid therapy is to taper oral therapy slowly to avoid any precipitation of adrenal insufficiency, and then put the patient on inhalation route. Now, if we compare with this beta 2 agonist and the xanthine theophylline, the chronic use of inhaled corticosteroids, they reduce the bronchial reactivity more than these previous two groups. If we give oral therapy with prednisone and continuously we are using it, so that is used usually if, in spite of the inhalational standard dose is 4 puff per day, twice a day, but then we are saying that the control is not effective. So instead of doing that, first of all, what do? We increase this. We are using higher inhalational doses, which usually appear to be more effective. And if those fail, then we switch the patient to the oral therapy. Now, because aerosol therapy is usually given as a maintenance therapy, but if we need an urgent treatment in some urgency, so obviously now we have to switch to the oral therapy, and oral dose of prednisone usually is about roughly 30 to 60 milligram per day. Or if we have to switch over, is more emergency, then we have to switch over to the intravenous route, and that we give methylprednisolone, that is 1 milligram per kg body weight. We have to calculate the dose accordingly, and that is given every 6 to 12 hours. Now, both the oral and parenteral corticosteroids, remember, they are reserved for the urgent treatment only due to severe possible adverse effects which usually we observe with this route, chronic therapy. Now, daily doses decrease after improvement in airway obstruction seen, and then gradually we stop it and we switch the patient to the aerosol treatment, aerosol route of administration. Now, because adrenal suppression by corticosteroid is usually dose related, and because secretion of endogenous corticosteroid has a diurnal variation, so usually how we do, it is customary to administer the corticosteroid early in the morning after endogenous adrenal corticosteroid hormone secretion has achieved its peak level during early in the morning. In most patients, systemic corticosteroid therapy can be discontinued in 7 to 10 days, but in other patients symptoms may worsen and we have to maintain the patient on oral or parenteral treatment. For prevention of nocturnal asthma especially, coming at night especially, oral or inhaled corticosteroids are most effective when given in the late afternoon. Regarding the adverse effects, remember, high dose of steroids, which may be through inhaled also. So, whenever through any route, when we are administering the high doses of steroids, that may cause, remember, adrenal suppression. That is very, very important. That is the main problem with the chronic use of corticosteroids, adrenal suppression. Another problem with the inhaled corticosteroids is they may cause oropharyngeal candidiasis, that fungal infection is produced in the oropharynx. But this problem can be reduced by gargle water and spit after puffs. So, that precaution if we advise to the patient, usually this oropharyngeal candidiasis can be minimized. Another problem is with the aerosol route is hoarseness due to direct local effect of inhaled corticosteroids on the vocal cords. that is also very common. So, that can also be minimized with the water gargles. After long term use, these agents may increase the risk of osteoporosis and cataracts. These two are the more common side or adverse effects of the chronic use of steroid. But at the same time, there may be a risk of cutaneous thinning. Skin is getting thin and thin. Or there may be temporary slowing of the growth, especially in the children. This growth problem is not seen in the adult patient. In children, inhaled corticosteroid therapy, even that may slow the rate of growth by about 1 centimeter over the initial first year of treatment, but later on this fact is not seen even in children also. When symptoms of asthma got flare up, give inhaled corticosteroid intermittently and not regularly twice a day. In most patients, the asthma symptom returned within a few weeks after discontinuation of the therapy, even if the patients have been taking in high doses for years, for example, more than 2 years or more than that, even then symptom may come back. Remember this thing. There is another claim to minimize the risk of systemic toxicity with the use of a specific inhaled corticosteroid, that is cyclophosphamide. That is a prodrug and that is given through inhalation, and after inhalation it is activated by the esterases which is present in the bronchial epithelial cells. When absorbed, the active product is tightly bound to plasma protein. So, obviously, plasma protein bonded drug neither can show any pharmacokinetic or any pharmacodynamic effect. So, it has little distribution to the site of action, which is due to glucose receptors in various parts, in the skin, in the eye, in the bone. So, minimum risk of cutaneous thinning or cataracts, osteoporosis, or what we have seen, temporary slowing of growth. All side effects are minimum with cyclophosphamide, because number one, remember, it is a prodrug. After taking through inhalation, its enzyme present, esterases present in bronchial epithelium, which activated. That activated form of cyclophosphamide is tightly bound with plasma protein, and then obviously, as we are saying it again and again, plasma protein drugs cannot show any pharmacokinetic or any pharmacodynamic effect. Now, the next important group is the leukotriene inhibitors or leukotriene blockers. Basically, they block the leukotriene pathway. Remember, leukotrienes are synthesized by variety of cells, eosinophil, mast cells, macrophages, and basophil, etc., etc. Especially leukotriene B4, that is a potent neutrophil chemoattractant. Potent means even the smallest amounts present in the blood in the site of these leukotriene B4 can act as a chemoattractant for the neutrophil. And leukotriene C4 and leukotriene D4, they also exert many effects in asthmatic patients, especially bronchoconstriction, increased bronchial activity, edema in the mucosal membrane or the tissue, and mucosal hypersecretion. All these effects are seen especially with the leukotriene C4 and D4 also. Mechanism of action of these leukotriene inhibitors, they inhibit the 5-lipoxygenase pathway, which is responsible for the production of the leukotrienes. So, thereby this inhibition of lipoxygenase, 5-lipoxygenase, prevent the leukotriene synthesis, and here the drug used is usually xylitol. Second, when they bind to leukotriene D4, so due to this leukotriene D4, which usually bind to receptor of the target tissue, in this way their effects or action on the receptors are prevented, and this is receptor blocker, usually is often Leukost and Monteleukost. Both these synthesis inhibitor and the receptor blocker, improve the asthma control and reduce the frequency of asthma exacerbation, especially in outpatient clinical trials. Their symptomatic effects and bronchial reactivity and air inflammations are usually less marked than the inhaled corticosteroids, but they are more nearly equal in reducing the frequency of exacerbation as with the inhaled corticosteroids. Usually they are taken orally. Some patients, especially children, they show poor compliance to the inhaled therapy. So, they can also be encouraged by oral route. Montelukast especially is approved for children as young as 6 years of age. Now, role of nicotines in aspirin-induced asthma. Remember, up to 5 to 10% of the asthmatic patients are sensitive to aspirin. Okay. Due to intake of aspirin, their asthma is worsened. So, even a very small dose can cause profound bronchoconstriction, and there is systemic release of histamine also. Montelukast here is mostly prescribed for the aspirin-induced asthma, and probably because it can be taken without regard to meals, and convenience of the once daily dose is also there. So, Montelukast is specifically useful in aspirin-induced asthma. Remember, Xylitol is reported to cause liver toxicity, which must be kept in mind while prescribing this drug. Cromolyn and nitochromil. Now, they are sodium salts. They are usually used for the management, especially in the children, but they are mostly replaced by the nicotine emitters. Otherwise, in the previous years, they were very much used in preventive for the preventive purposes. Both these cromolyn and nitochromil, they are sodium salt, they are poorly absorbed from GIT, and therefore they must be given through inhalation because they are present in a microfine powder or microfine suspension form. When taken through inhalation, these drugs, they inhibit effectively both the antigen and exercise-induced asthma also. And their chronic use, which usually after 4 times per day, slightly reduce the overall level of bronchial activity. So, their only usefulness is prophylaxis, no effect for the management of the acute or chronic attacks, only prophylactically. For example, in seasonal bronchial asthma patient and allergic rhinitis and other like that, which feel these attacks. So, prior to that period, we can prescribe these drugs and prophylactic role may be seen. Their mechanism of action, both these drugs, they alter the function of delayed chloride channels in the cell membranes and thus inhibit the cell activation. Especially the mast cells, these drugs, cromolyn and nitochromil, inhibit the early response to antigen challenge. So, on eosinophil, these drugs inhibit the inflammatory response to inhalation of allergens. On airway nerves, they mediate cough. So, this may be one of the common side effects of these drugs, cromolyn and nitochromil. Cromolyn inhibits the mast cell degranulation in lungs but not in the skin. So, allergic reactions to skin, they are rarely useful, very much rarely. So, they are useful only in allergic reactions where lung is involved. As we have told you, clinical use is mainly prophylactic use. So, acute protective effect of cromolyn is useful for administration shortly before exercise, because exercise-induced asthma may be controlled if we are using it prophylactically, or before unavoidable exposure to an allergen like sulfur dioxide or causes of occupational asthma or seasonal asthma in various, for example, especially here at Islamabad is very common. So their role, prophylactic role, is very much important. When 2 to 4 puffs 2 to 4 times a day are taken regularly by the patient, even with the non-seasonal asthma, they significantly reduce the symptomatic severity and the need for other drugs, for example, for bronchodilator medication, especially in young patients with extrinsic asthma. So in such patient, even then the effectiveness of these drugs have been seen. Remember, these drugs are not as potent or as effective as inhaled corticosteroids. So they are given as a therapeutic trial of 4 weeks duration only. If the effects are not seen within these 4 weeks, then we stop using these drugs. Again, both these drugs may be used through nasal spray or in the form of eye drops, especially to reduce the symptoms of allergic rhinoconjunctivitis. And we have seen up to 75% of the patient, even during peak pollen season, when the patient may be suffering from the severe allergic rhinitis or severe allergic conjunctivitis, their nasal spray or eye drops, they have been seen very much useful in up to 75% of such patients. Adverse effects, these cromolyn and lidocarimab, they are so poorly absorbed that the adverse effects are very much minor in nature, and usually they are also localized to the site of deposition only. Rarely systemic absorption we have seen, and these local effects may be in the form of throat irritation, a local cough, or dryness of the mouth, and rarely chest tightness or wheezing. We have seen because serious adverse effects are very much rare. Some symptoms can be prevented by inhaling beta-2 agonist prior to cromolyn and lidocarimab. So these side effects can be minimized if we are prescribing and advising the patient to take beta-2 agonist Ventolin type drugs in the form of inhaler prior to these drugs. Reversible dermatitis, myositis or gastroenteritis in very much less than 2% of patients, and a very few cases of pulmonary infiltration and with eosinophil anaphylaxis have been, but all are reversible, remember. As I have told you previously, it was widely used in children, but now its role in childhood asthma has been reduced due to significantly greater efficacy of low-dose corticosteroids and availability of leukotriene inhibitors. So due to availability of these two better alternatives, the use of these cromolyn and lidocarimab even in children have been very much reduced. Now the next group, anti-IgE monoclonal antibodies. Here usually the only drugs up till now which is useful, that is omalizumab. So this antibody, number one, it inhibits the binding of the IgE to the mast cells, and number two, that IgE which has already bound to these mast cells, this omalizumab does not activate that also. In this way, it inhibits the mast cell degranulation. Now, usually it's used for 10 weeks. If continuously used, it can lower the plasma IgE to the undetectable level and thus significantly reduces the magnitude of the bronchospastic response. So, we must use at least for 10 weeks before observing such effects. Now, repeated use of this antibody reduces the frequency and severity of the asthma exacerbation, especially with a clear environmental antigen precipitating factor, and thus improves the nasal and conjunctival symptoms in patients with perennial or seasonal allergic rhinitis. It also reduces the corticosteroid requirement and even reduces the hospitalization of the person up to 88%. So much useful this antibody is. Now, as far as the acute asthma is concerned, its management, the treatment of acute attacks in patient reporting to the hospital requires number one, close continuous clinical assessment and repeated objective measurement of the lung function along while we are treating those patients. For patients with mild acute attacks, inhalation of beta 2 receptor agonist is as effective as subcutaneous injection of epinephrine, remember. So, for mild acute attacks, there is no need to go for subcutaneous epinephrine injection. We can use beta 2 inhaler also. Short term relief of these acute attacks is effectively achieved by agents that relax the airways muscle, as we have seen with the beta 2 agonists, which are the most effective and therefore most widely used drugs. The next group, xanthine derivatives with theophylline, methylxanthine, or even antimuscarinics, they are also used for reversal of airway constriction because both are bronchodilator. So, these drugs are more effective than intravenous administration of aminophylline. Aminophylline is a soluble salt of theophylline actually. Now, when the attacks are severe attacks require treatment with the number one, oxygen, frequent or continuous administration of aerosolized beta 2 agonist albuterol, and even systemic treatment with the prednisone or methylprednisolone. Obviously, prednisone will be oral and injectable will be methylprednisolone up to 1.5 milligram per kg of body weight every 6 to 12. This is the protocol for the severe acute attacks. And even this aggressive treatment is invariably not effective, and patient must be watched closely for signs of deterioration. And then we may think of general anesthesia and intubation and mechanical ventilation for the asthmatic patient, because these may be life-saving if respiratory failure supervenes. After acute attack, long-term control is most effectively achieved with the anti-inflammatory agents like inhaled corticosteroids, as we have seen before, plus leukotriene antagonists and mast cell stabilizer, as we have seen Coromelin and Indochromyl, if especially, although they are more and more useful for the preventive role, but we have seen if we are using with these bronchodilators and the anti-inflammatory, they also have some useful effects. This is for the long-term control. Remember, severe asthma can be treated with humanized monoclonal antibodies, omalizumab also, which is specifically, as we have seen, targeted against IgE, responsible for the allergic sensitization. Aspirin-sensitive asthma, we have already seen. Obviously, here mainly leukotrienes are involved. So, main drug used is the leukotriene antagonist, and that is. Now, lastly, as far as the prospects for the prevention is concerned, the high prevalence of asthma, both in the developed and the developing countries, obviously call for a strategy for the primary prevention. We must chalk out some strategy. There was some old protocol, there must be some strict antigen avoidance, especially during infancy, but now even this has not shown any effectiveness. Now, what we advocate nowadays, in fact, we must encourage the young children to grow up in the environments where allergens are present. So, growing up from birth, especially in a farm with the domestic animals, or in a household where cats or dogs are kept as pets, what we see appears to be protect against developing asthma. Gradually, automatically, this immunization develops, self prevention is produced.